ALS Alternative Learning Systems.
The 2+2 dialogue between India and US and in general Indo-US relations. That is the topic I would like to discuss right now. In fact, the 2+2 dialogue took place in September 2018, but that is definitely considered to be a major step forward in the bilateral relations between India and the US. This meeting, this 2+2 dialogue is between the defense ministers as well as the foreign ministers of both the countries. So the Secretary of State, the foreign minister's equivalent at that time, Mike Pompeo, and the Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis from the US side. From Indian side, the then Foreign Minister of India, Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, and the then the Defense Minister of India, Nirmala Sitharaman, participated in this 2+2 dialogue. And the decision about the 2+2 dialogue was taken during the high-level summit-level meeting between Indian Prime Minister and the US President in 2017, June 2017. Then initially, this meeting was supposed to be held in January 2018, but that was postponed. Then again it was pushed back for April, then to July, and finally it happened in September after much dilly-dallying. That itself showed that the seriousness with which the announcement was done is not there when it comes to its implementation. And what is special about 2+2? This is a special this shows a special relationship between the two countries, because the defense ministers and the foreign ministers are sitting together, and according to many analysts, the dialogue represents an upgrade in the ties, as it is seen as a platform for both the sides to discuss issues of strategic importance. It is seen as an acknowledgement of India's rise as an economic and strategic power. It's an acknowledgement of India's rise as an economic and strategic power, and apart from India, the US holds such a 2+2 dialogue only with Australia and Japan. That shows India is climbing in the ladder of as far as the US is concerned, its importance with various other countries in the globe. Only with Australia and Japan they have a 2+2 dialogue. And now when it comes to the various steps taken by the US in the recent past to improve the relationship. First of all, the US has renamed its command, the Pacific Command, as Indo-Pacific Command. And that means no India, no Indo-Pacific strategy. That is what the US wants to tell us right now. So definitely that shows the refocusing, or rather the renewed focus on Indian Ocean region as well as on India. That is why the US has renamed the US Command, US Pacific Command, as Indo-Pacific Command. So definitely the US has more focus on this region. Second point is, when India decided to have to purchase the S-400 missiles from Russia, naturally there was a lot of heartburn in US, and the US even accused that some of the critics accused that this will compromise some of the secrecy of the US aircrafts and all in the region. So, to avoid any further complication, a bill was introduced in the US Congress to give exemption to India, which is known as the National Defense Authorization Act, that provides India a waiver from any unintended consequences of Russia sanctions. So that means there are a lot of sanctions on Russia. So India is given an exemption on this through this National Defense Authorization Act, which is passed in the US Congress. So that is a welcome sign. The US is not directly opposing. Also, the Commerce Secretary has announced that India will have a Strategic Trade Authorization 1 status. Strategic Trade Authorization 1 status for transfer of some dual purpose technology and high technology trade to India. So India will be given exemption in some of the dual purpose technologies by giving India a position or a particular status called Strategic Trade Authorization 1 status to India. Again, the Mike Pompeo has even talked about a $113 million special package to counter the Chinese One Belt and One Road initiative, or the BRI. Of course, it's a small amount, but they talked about how to counter it, or rather how Americans can support in implementing this. And most importantly, recently India was declared as a major defense partner, and that is a upgrade in our relationship between India and the. So many steps have been taken recently to improve our relationship. Now let me talk about what are the key outcomes of that 2+2 dialogue. First of all, as I told, the first time such a dialogue took place. Definitely that is a upgrade in our strategic partnership. It is beyond the strategic partnership right now, and the key issues included cross-border terrorism, India's bid to enter into nuclear supplier group, then the issues of H1B visa to the Indians to US, the work visa in US. So all these things were discussed, and most importantly, 3-4 major outcomes we can definitely say. One is a hotline between foreign ministers and defense ministers of the two countries were set up. So that is that's an upgrade. Second, we have once again reiterated to strengthen our defense ties. In fact, in another video I mentioned about this, that in 2014 we overtook even Russia as the #1 defense supplier. The US became the #1 defense supplier of India in 2014. The US accounts for 12% of the total defense purchase right now. Russia is 58%, but definitely there is a strengthening of the defense ties going on. And in fact, when it comes to the signing of Lemova and Comcosa, definitely that is a movement forward. There is no doubt regarding this. Then through this meeting, a definite message was given to Pakistan. Especially, we called upon Pakistan to ensure that the territory under its control is not used to launch terrorist attacks on other countries. So naturally, US is firmly on India's side when it comes to terrorism, and the Pakistan's role in the terrorism, definitely that is a welcome sign. Also, there is a renewed focus on the Indo-Pacific region, and the joint statement clearly mentioned that both sides will work together and in concert with other partners towards advancing a free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific region. Free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific region based on the recognition of ASEAN as the central power. So that is what we have said. That is what exactly India's position also. Keeping ASEAN as a central power, there should be an open, free and inclusive Indo-Pacific region. Also, we have a joint statement related to infrastructure development. Sustainable debt financing practices in infrastructure development should be there. It is an indirect reference to BRI, which we believe that it is not sustainable. So the 2+2 dialogue, it is the first step. Definitely it is a elevated platform. We are not expecting much breakthroughs here, but when it has come to the final analysis between India and the US, despite all these theatrics, I personally feel that the bilateral relationship has not improved over the years. There is a stagnation in Indo-US relations. The height or the hype or the high point was India signing the Indo-US nuclear deal in 2008 and President Obama's visit in 2010. Since then, there is a gradual decline in the relationship. If not, there is a flattening, or rather there is a plateauing of the relations. It is not moving forward. It is not going to the next level. Definitely, there are many factors involved in it. First of all, the relief provided by the National Defense Authorization Act with respect to Russian sanctions is a welcome step, but it is inconclusive. It's not final. Of course, with the S-400 missile on that regard, that's a welcome step, but it is inconclusive. Definitely, it is a movement forward. Similarly, the Trump's pull out from the Iran nuclear deal and the sanctions on Iran is a step in the wrong direction. US is unilaterally withdrawing from the Iran oil deal, the P5+1 deal, and now US wants to impose unilateral sanctions on the Iranian trade and oil export, which India is not liking, because Iran was the third largest supplier of oil to India at this stage. So India has strong commercial interests, and it is affecting adversely India's interest because of the US step, the unilateral step, which is opposed by even the European Union members. So we have a difference of opinion. We have definitely a difference of opinion in Iran. Similarly, we have a difference of opinion in Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, the US wants somehow a pullout to take place, and the US is even more willing to have a compromise with Taliban at the expense of the democratically elected government in Afghanistan. They are undermining whatever progress we made in the democracy and the people to people, the contact which we have initiated, and the social and economic development of the region. India has strong reservations on the US strategy in Afghanistan. Then, in the Belt and Road Initiative, definitely India is the most vocal critic. US is also not a supporter of it, but more needs to be done. $113 million in comparison to $1 trillion investment by China. I think it is too less and too little to counter this Chinese initiative. Then again, we have innumerable trade disputes with the US right now. The US has imposed new tariffs on Indian steel and aluminum, citing national security grounds. These tariffs are, different from sanctions, but the point is additional tariff means India will not be export that item, so it is definitely a negative step. India also is taking some countermeasures. Then the US withdrew India or rather from the GSP, the general, that system of preference. We were given some preference in trade as a developing country earlier because of some objections, especially by the dairy industry in US, as well as the by the medical equipments industry in US, because India is not giving a fair India is not giving the US a even field. That is what they are accusing because of the restrictions in India. So India was removed from the GSP, which is definitely a negative step in our bilateral relations. Another big problem which we face, which is creating hurdle, is the American approach towards the foreigners working in US and the H1B visa issue, and even the American stand, the president's stand of removing all illegal migrants and those who don't have the correct documents. Definitely, thousands of Indians will be affected by that. India and Indians are concerned about the US steps regarding throwing out the illegal migrants as well as those migrants without proper documentation, or rather less document or not so proper document. Then another big issue between India and the US you should know is, even though we signed the Indo-US nuclear deal in 2008, no nuclear commerce has taken place. Not even a single bilateral trade has taken place in the nuclear field after 11 years of signing it. One of the fundamental reasons for that is our Nuclear Security Act, which was passed in 2010, which is the Nuclear Liability Act, which was passed in 2010. But the fact of the matter is, we are not able to move forward in the nuclear trade, which is definitely a setback. Then, another big issue I would like to talk about is in the bilateral strategic partnership between India and the US. The US has removed the Department of Commerce from the strategic dialogue with India. It has included defense, but it removed commerce from the strategic dialogue. See, India is with the US, our bilateral trade is almost $140 billion, and India has a trade surplus also there. And it is one place where India's export is more than the import from that country. So India is in a favorable position, but the US president removed a Department of Commerce from the strategic dialogue. In the 2+2 dialogue, commerce was not included. This is definitely a negative step, because bilateral relations, there is a strong element of commerce in our bilateral relationship. Defense, definitely it is improving, that's a welcome sign, but by removing the commerce from the bilateral dialogue, we are going one step backward. Then there is again a basic inconsistency in the Trump's view that sanctions against, say, China, sorry, sanctions against various countries and even sanctions against, say, Iran will help in the US strategic goals, but the economic measures are harming their partners like India, because when they are imposing sanctions on Iran, we are, we are harmed by their steps. And but the US is not willing to accept that. US is not willing to accept that strategic consequence. And US is going ahead with the sanctions against China and all, which is definitely a negative step in the long run. In fact, overall, if you look, the US, that the protectionism which is crept in the US policy, the anti-globalization steps taken by the US. Please remember, the US was the biggest proponent of globalization. US wanted every economy to be opened up. They used to complain about India and China earlier that we are not doing enough to open our economies. Now, when our economy started exporting something, the US is talking about protectionism. So, it is an irony that the opponents of protectionism, that is the US, they wanted to remove all protectionism. Now, they became the champions of protectionism. And earlier, the US had no problem in inviting talent, we were complaining about brain drain. We did not want to send our professionals to go to US and all, because for us it was a brain drain. Today we are asking US to open up so that our Indian professionals can reach US. So the diametrically opposite things are happening. So their stand on H1B visa issue, their stand on trade, their stand on Afghanistan, their stand not doing enough in the against the Chinese design of Belt and Road Initiative. So all these things are definitely not helping India and US in taking our relations to the next level. Yes, on the face of it, we have a good relation, but that peak was achieved long before. Despite all theatrics, despite all efforts by our Prime Minister to show that he has improved the relationship substantially, I don't think the relationship has improved substantially. Yes, we can safely say that the relationship might not have gone down, but it has definitely not moved up compared to what Dr. Manmohan Singh and the previous government has achieved vis-a-vis Indo-US relations. Lots to be done. On ground, things are not moving forward. Our Afghan policy is going totally in the divergent way. Trade relations, we are definitely having trouble. So, on the whole, Indo-US relations are plateaued, it is stagnant, it is not taking the next level. Lot need to be done on ground, and for that, overall economic growth in the world, it is a must. Economy across the globe, there is stagnation. Even in the US, things are not improving the way it is expected, and unless there is some energy in bilateral trade or the global trade, unless there is an improvement in the bilateral global trade and global economy, I don't think there will be any chance where US will have a rethinking, because under Trump's rule, he is talking about protectionism and protect the American economy. This is going to harm the US in the long run rather than help them, and it is again not helping even the Indo-US relations. So relations are at a stagnation point. The US is shrinking. The US influence in the world is shrinking. See, even the US has withdrawn from the Paris Climate Accord. So in 2015, they have withdrawn from the Trans-Pacific Partnership. They are renegotiating with the North Atlantic Free Trade Agreement. So in all these areas, we can clearly see that the US position in the globe is shrinking, and our relationship with the US is not improving or increasing beyond a point. There is stagnation in the relations.